The address for the slides for anyone who wishes to follow along live is speakerdeck.com. That's the word speaker and deck /Boyarsky, my last name, B-O-Y as in boy, A-R-S-K-Y as in sky. Would anyone like me to repeat that? Okay. Speakerdeck.com /Boyarsky, B-O-Y-A-R-S-K-Y. With that, let's get started. My name is Jeanne. I've been volunteering with FIRST for approximately 15 years. I started in FRC, I then moved on to also do FL and FTC judging, and I'm now on the New York City FIRST Planning Committee. I'm a Toastmaster, which means I have lots and lots of practice in public speaking, and I speak at 3 or more public conferences every year, along with my company's internal conference. I also work as a professional programmer doing Java development, and I will be giving away this physical book at the end to one random person in this room. I'm also a Java champion, one of 400 in the world, which is pretty cool. Okay. I have a commercial that you can't see on the screen about volunteering for the regional. You go to firstinspires.org and log in. You choose the New York City event and you volunteer. It's a lot of fun and it helps me fill roles. But let's get started with what you all came here to see today. I am going to ask people to participate, so I know we're all tired from having pizza for lunch, but hopefully we'll fix that here. And be in the moment. The slides are available for viewing now or later so that you can focus on paying attention. So first, let's brainstorm. What are some reasons someone might want to speak at a conference like the one we're at today, or a professional one if you're an adult or looking at an internship? What do you get out of it? Yeah, recognition is a great one. What else? Yeah. Sharing with others is a key one as well. I'm repeating for the people in the front because I assume nobody can hear them who's behind them. Any more? And I saw one other hand somewhere. Yeah. The ones that I had listed out are participation, sharing what you know, we had that one. Learning the topic better is a good one. Presenting something solidifies it in your mind. It's the same thing as tutoring or teaching somebody who's younger than you. Being forced to explain it helps you understand the stuff better on your own, which is super important when you're presenting because you get to learn and you get to have that extra interest. You get to build reputation and exposure, which is similar to the recognition one. That helps when you're applying to future jobs, internships, opportunities. And even within the job, it's like some people just did their job and some people did their job and taught others. You get more bonuses with the second one. It's easier to attend a conference a lot of the time. This is for paid conferences if you're speaking because you get that, you don't have to go ask someone for money. Networking is also an important one. People see you as a speaker. They'll come over to you afterwards. They'll remember you. You aren't just another person in the room. So it helps you professionally with that as well. And the last one I wrote is recognition, which is already said. Then we have conferences exist both online and in person. There's a lot of considerations in choosing them. One of them is if it's online, you don't have to travel and you get to wear your pajamas, which is nice. It's always nice to present comfortably. More people can attend when it's remote and online, but the networking isn't quite as good. People are a little quieter when they're at their computer, or they may be doing something else at the same time. And you lose that one-on-one afterwards where someone's like, oh, I had a question about that. They feed you when you go to in-person things. We won't put pizza today. At professional conferences, it's free because they have sponsors. And the last one is audience response. Audience response is different online, and that could be good or bad. If you're afraid of speaking, it's great because you don't see the audience at all and you don't have to wonder how many of them there are or worry about it. If you're an experienced speaker, it's not so great because you don't get that feedback on whether people are following you or they're bored or everybody's on their phone like this. So I miss that when I'm presenting online because I don't get to see whether I've connected with people. Another thing to think about when doing a presentation, whether at a conference like this or a professional one, is do you want a co-presenter? It's a lot easier if you present with somebody else. You get to split up the work, right? Divide and conquer. You're going to pick this topic. I'm going to pick this topic, and we're going to deal with it that way. So you have less to do. It's the same reason impact is easier to do with 3 people instead of 2, right? You can focus in on your specific area, think about what you want to say, and have that be your expertise. You have a backup if something happens. Someone gets a sore throat, if somebody's late, if train got stuck, subway, we all know how that happens. You have other people who know the material, right? They may not know it as well since it was your section, but you practiced and they've seen you do it. And most importantly, someone's there and not, well, we had to cancel because one person got stuck on the subway. Sorry, everybody. You also get to banter. When you talk to people one-on-one, you have this, oh, what happened? Remember when that? Yeah, that's fun. And that makes it a little more relaxing and less of a high-pressure situation. If you're doing a demonstration, you have someone to run the demo. The Robo-Tigers gave a really good example of this earlier. There were people who were handing things out. The speaker wasn't trying to manage that and speak at the same time. And they made really good use of having 4 people up in this area. I have one. I'm a terrible role model. Growth. If somebody is new to presenting, they can present with someone else. Right? Maybe you have a senior on your team. Bring a freshman or sophomore with you. Maybe they'll watch. Maybe they'll help you present. Maybe they'll pass things out. But they get to see what it's like being up here so that the next year you have another person who's going to feel comfortable doing it. Not all conferences allow co-presenters, so your mileage may vary here. Check whether it's allowed. And I had some cute aliens on the screen that nobody can see, but there were 2 of them, and they were co-presenting. All right, so next up is brainstorming. How do you even come up with a topic to present about? Well, think about what have you done in the last year, right? It could be school, it could be a job, it could be robotics. You know a lot more things now than you did a year ago, and all of those are things somebody else might not know. There's also, what are you doing right now? What are you working on right now? Because a few months from now, you're going to know that thing. And that's, again, something that other people might want to know. What have you learned? School, maybe? What's a problem you solved? It was really, really, really hard to get that vision thing working, and now we did. That's the moment to write down how you did it, because it's fresh in your mind what the problems are. Do we have a screen? Yay! And it made it for more than 8 seconds.
We should write that down.
Yeah. We could give a talk on how you solve the problem of the screen. What's something you wish others would know? Right? Sometimes you've been doing something for a while and someone does something and it's like, I know how to do that so much better. I wish everyone knew how to do it the way I could do it. That's something to present about. What would you tell a new person? A lot of us do newbie ed. What do we teach the freshmen on our team? These are all things that you can teach other people and you've thought about them, which makes it super easy. So now we're going to do an exercise. Can you form groups of 2 to 4 people? And everybody in that group share with the other people in the group what's something that someone could give a talk about. I'm not asking you to do the talk. There are no follow-ups here. But what's something you learned or something people might want to share? And then I'm going to ask each group to tell us one thing that was said in their group. Okay? So let's move around if you have to, but find 2 to 4 people and share. Hi.
Hopefully it works. Streaming.
So then I just click start streaming when we resume.
Let's try it. Okay.
Oh, we weren't live before?
Yeah, we weren't live before because
Okay. Cool. 2 more minutes in your groups. All right, we're going to end our groups. Raise your hand if you can hear me. How come when I do this here it works, and when I do it at work nothing happens? Everyone just keeps talking. All right, so what's an idea from your group?
So one of the ideas from my group is I like to talk about mechanical things a lot because that's resonates with me very deeply. It's something that's part of how I think about say daily life.
Okay, cool. An idea with a passion. Something from your group?
We could talk about like, yeah, we could talk about, for topic ideas, we could talk about like sponsorships or the outreach that's beneficial.
Cool. And you project well, so I don't need to repeat that. What's an idea from your group? Yeah. Solving problems. Okay.
We had the talks we did today.
You cheated.
But Howard mentioned doing something about manufacturing because he works in that space.
Okay. Is your group sort of behind to the right of you?
I think it's like good way to strange myself. I wasn't really great at that. I think it's like a good way to like get other people out.
Okay. And then there's two groups in the back.
One topic was that like we could discuss things about like teamwork and so like team bonding exercises.
Teamwork. Okay. And the group in the very back?
Yeah, so our team was a rookie team last year. We're looking at ways to leverage that experience to present about how to form new community teams outside of the school district.
Community teams. And that's a sweet spot to do it in. You're new enough to remember what problems existed, but not so established that you've forgotten what it's like to be new. All right. Raise your hand if you would be interested in hearing a talk on any of the ideas you heard today. And I see almost everyone's hand is up. And that was the point of this exercise, that sometimes it's hard to think of ideas because it's like, I know this, so therefore everybody knows this. But it's not the case. It's like everyone wants to hear of your perspective on it, or maybe they don't know it, or it's like, oh, I'm going to get some best practices out of this. Right? I went to some talks today where I thought I knew most of the material and I still came away with stuff. And that's a really cool way of getting topic ideas. So now that we know how to come up with a topic idea, we're going to talk about how to write an abstract or a CFP, call for papers or call for proposals. That is how you get admitted to a conference. Some conferences are more competitive than others. Right? Some conferences basically you submit and they're like, oh, welcome. And some conferences, they get 100 people who apply and get to choose 4. Right? So you want to know how to write this. And this is a good skill to have because it lets you be more likely to get chosen. And it also helps you give a better presentation by thinking about what you're going to do. There's 2 purposes of an abstract. The first one is to get the selection committee to pick you in the first place. That one is pretty commonly thought of as a reason. But there's also a second reason, which is the attendees. At a lot of conferences, like today, there's multiple talks going on at the same time. And people only have 2 things to choose based on. 3 things to choose based on. One is the title of your talk. The second one is your abstract. And the third one maybe is your name or background. Sometimes like, oh, I'm going to go to that talk because Venkat's a really good speaker. I don't care what he's speaking about. I want to see him speak. Venkat is a Java speaker. He is amazing. So I see his name and I'm done. I'm choosing that one. But it helps people know what are they going to get out of the talk, should they go? And are they the target audience? Right? If you're going to be giving a talk on mechanical design, unless it's super basic, I'm not going to follow it. And I should know that from the abstract and go somewhere else. And the people who have that more advanced knowledge are going to be able to go to that talk and appreciate it. You don't want someone to be in the room just to be in the room, right? You want people who are going to learn and be engaged. And if that's not the case, they should be in a different room. So tips on picking your abstract. First, think about the topic. Right? We all did that. We picked a topic of here's something someone could talk about. Then think really specifically, what do you want your audience to remember? Right? What do you want them to take away from this talk? For me, it's how to write an abstract and maybe motivate people to present in the future. I'm going to put Howard and Brian on the spot because you guys spoke today. Can one of you tell us what takeaway you had for your attendees?
Finish your robot early.
All right, finish your robot early.
I guess the bigger picture takeaway is you don't have to have the best robot to win original.
I was looking more for the second one.
Yeah.
Because the second one is more like a theme, right? If people go back to their team and say, what did you learn at Brian's talk? We don't have to have a perfect robot. We need to get it done, right? That's an elevator pitch. That's something they can remember. You don't want them to say, oh, Brian gave a really good talk. It was about robots. Like, that's great, right? Then they haven't taken away that thing. And knowing what the takeaway is lets you write a better abstract because it lets you focus on the thing you're trying to do. You still get the talk. Nobody's not coming because they read your summary. But you let them think, oh, okay, so I'm going to be listening. I'm going to be primed to hear about how I can win with this robot. What is important? What should I sacrifice, right? I probably shouldn't sacrifice driving and say, well, my robot doesn't drive, but here it is. It allows them to make that decision and be in the right mindset. And it also lets them be excited about that presentation. That is a really good presentation. I didn't go because I want to support one of the kids on my team, but I'm going to watch it on video tomorrow. So do you want people to learn something? Do you want them to acquire a skill, right? We're all going to learn how to gesture with our hands during this presentation or something. And remember to keep audience focused as you're writing your abstract. A lot of the time, people are tempted to write their abstract in the third person, right? Robots are good. They're built of metal. They're programmed in languages. The end. No. Be more engaging, right? You're going to come to this presentation. You're going to learn about FIRST robotics and what it entails to build a robot. I'm using the active voice, and I'm letting people envision themselves there. So using language like attendees will or you will helps you think about the attendees and keep them focused. And most importantly, remember this during the actual presentation too. I've seen people who write really good abstracts thinking about the audience, and then we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this. Thank you for coming. Like, oh, okay, but what was the audience part of that, right? This isn't a book report. All right, now we're going to do a few abstracts that are not good abstracts and see if people can identify what's wrong with them. So our first abstract is this talk is about math. Why is this a bad abstract? Yeah, this is ridiculously broad. I have no idea what this talk is about. I don't know if it's the right level of math. I don't know if I'm interested in it, and I have no idea what this person is going to be talking about. Not a good abstract. But this is why this presentation exists. I used to see abstracts like this, and I never want to again. Okay, our second bad abstract. What went wrong with our robot? Yeah, it's still too vague. It's better than math. But you don't know what it's about, and more importantly, you don't know if the scope of this is going to be something you care about. Right? Is this going to be a hardware talk? Is this going to be a software talk? Is this going to be a strategy talk? This is something I want to know before the talk. And we're back to the example about mechanical. If this is going to be about all the specific parts of the robot and how they failed, I'm not interested. There's other people on the team that do that would be super interested, but I'm not going to follow it. I would rather be at a different talk. If it was about how autonomous failed, that's my talk. So let people know what they're going to hear. Give them enough detail that they can tell whether this is the talk for them. Okay, this one's long, so we don't have the problem if it's too short. Are you hiring interns? Come learn how to choose the best candidate from a stack of resumes. You won't even need to do an interview, and you'll have the perfect person. What's wrong with this?
So you're saying that hiring interns, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't say anything about like where you're hiring for. So you're basically saying like, oh, you're just gonna hire them because you don't know what it's about. So you're just basically hiring somebody that who doesn't know what they're gonna get a job for.
Okay. I didn't think of that, so that wasn't what I was going for, but that is true. So let's pretend that I had a sentence at the beginning that was super specific about the type of internship and exactly what I wanted. It's still a bad abstract. Why, Ryan?
It's making a very big promise.
Yeah, does anyone believe this? Of course not. That's what interviews are for. Howard? That's not the problem with the abstract. Contractions are fine. Brian nailed it. That was what I was going for. This is a marketing pitch. This is not believable. And if you can't believe my abstract, you're also not going to believe my talk, so you don't need to go to it. It is not possible to pick the perfect person from a stack of resumes unless you're picking someone at random, in which case you could have just picked a random number, which is how we're going to give away the book later. But that's not good. It's detailed. It's specific, minus the first sentence that I didn't think to add. But it's not a believable talk. And I saw one like this as well, where it promised the world, and it's like, really? So you say. You also have to make sure that the audience knows why the thing is important. If they can't follow why they should go to your talk, they're not going to. There are many different forms of abstracts, and I have a template that I like to recommend to people when you're starting out. I follow it still because it lets you write the abstract quickly and it lets it be effective. The first thing is an optional hook. This is either a statement or a question to get people in the mood of what you're talking about. It lets them know, oh, I should read this. Then, what is the topic and why should I care about it? Right? Your robot doesn't need to be perfect. We know what the topic is. What are the takeaways? Why should people attend? If you come, we're going to help you prioritize what are the most important parts of your robot. And finally, a call to action and a conclusion. And this is the one that's important to be in the you or attendees will. Help them envision themselves there or not, right? Software developers will learn, blah, 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 right? At the impact presentation, you will learn. Make sure there's that connection. They can see what's going on. I often get asked what's the right length for an abstract. There's no right answer to that, but it can be too long or too short. If it's a sentence or two, it's too short. And if it goes on and on and on, it's too long. But there's not an exact length for a perfect abstract. If you have a target audience, mention it. I gave a talk once that was meant for managers. I almost never do that. Most of my talks are for developers or presentation skills. I put it in the subject because I knew people would see my name and accept a different talk. So I was like, I'm going to put in the title, Java for Managers. So now we're going to use the template, see how it fits in. So first up, we have a hook. Have you ever wondered how conference speakers start out? Thinking about submitting yourself? Topic. In this session, we'll go over how to write a CFP. I spelled it out, I don't want to assume people know that, or abstract, and tips on actually presenting. Come join us for a fun session and take away key skills. Then we have the conclusion, the call to action. Whether you hope to present at a session like this one, or champs, or just learning for the future, this talk is for you. So I'm pretty explicit about why you should come to this talk. And if somebody is reading this and it's like, I never want to speak to another human being for the rest of my life, there are 3 other talks going on right now. They should go there. All right, we're going to go back to our groups, same groups as before. And we're going to try to follow this template in order to write an abstract. This time I'm not going to call on you at the end, so you don't have to memorize it. But whether it's a topic you picked before or like New York City is fun, try to go through these pieces and see if you can put together an abstract in your groups. One more minute. All right, we're going to start again. Raise your hand if you're ready. All right. So that was it about the abstracts. I mentioned that already. So now we're going to talk about how to actually do a presentation, right? You got accepted. Woohoo! Now it's time to actually present. Okay, so there's some classic advice here. I don't agree with all of it, but I can't not expose you to it. Use 24 font size, don't have more than 7 bullets, don't have more than 7 words per line, use pictures and images. Okay, great. There's some caveats here. First of all, you want to have as few words on a slide as possible and have it be as big as possible, which means it's okay to have different font sizes on different slides. Having a whole pile of empty space is just wasted space. Also, 7 is too many. People aren't going to remember 7 things, right? So you've just given them too much. There's no fee for having more slides. It's okay to have a point per slide or 2 points per slide. Having more slides is a good thing. A long time ago, there was a thing about how like you should have a slide per minute or 2 minutes or something ridiculously like that. I don't know why. We were still presenting online, but people have moved away from that in favor of less slides and more visuals, and I think that's a good thing. If you're presenting online, you can get away with a smaller font size because people are on their computer. They're fairly close to the computer. So 20 point font size is just fine on a computer. You want to avoid having too much information, however, though. So if you're using a smaller font, it's because you're trying to show something like here's a table of data, not just while we're online, I can cram a lot of data on the slide. And it should still be big enough. This is size 14, which is too small in a presentation. People aren't looking at it full screen. They've got the visual, they've got you, maybe they've got another window open. And yes, you can zoom in on your computer. But if you make me zoom, I now have a job, and it's not listening to you. It's find what's important on the screen as you're talking, which is going to directly conflict with listening to the message you're trying to send me. So don't make people zoom. All right, we're doing a little show of hands thing. I have 4 slides here, and I want to see what people think is best. Who thinks slide 1 is best? 2? 3? A lot of 3s. 4? 4. So we're about half and half. I'm in the 4 camp. I like that the bullets are spread out a little from each other because it makes it easier to skim or look at quickly. But both 3 and 4 are fine. On some level, this is a matter of personal preference. Just being deliberate about which one you choose is helpful. All right. So then we have the whole why are we in this in the first place? Go back to the abstract. Put some effort into it. It got picked. People read it. They remember what you said you were going to speak about. And you want to meet that commitment. It's super annoying when you read an abstract, get really excited that we're going to cover what was in the beta test this year, and then get there and find out, oh, there was no beta test this year, right? And now it's like, well, I feel ripped off. So, remembering the audience read that, remembering what they're looking for is helpful. And sometimes you have to adapt during the presentation, right? Sometimes you'll start a presentation like about an advanced Java thing, and it's like, all right, raise your hand if you used Java before. There's 2 people who've used Java. Well, that's no good. I'm making it up. This talk is not about Java. I don't care who knows Java. But it's a problem if I'm giving a presentation on Java. So if I'm doing that, it's like, all right, I guess I'm going to introduce everything I speak about and skip covering advanced material because it's not going to work. That's only a problem with technical presentations. In business, I feel like you're not going to have that problem. But it can happen in strategy too. If you're giving a talk on strategy and you ask people on a scale of 1 to 5, what would you know about first? And everyone says, what's first? Guess what? Your strategy talk has just changed, right? Because now you have to explain what first is. You have to explain the rules. You have to explain what Thomas is. You have to explain what alliance is. Or you have a whole backstory on your hands. That is not what you intended to speak about. And it's not going to be in your slides, but that's okay. You still have to catch the audience up for your slides to make sense. You're going to have to annotate things. You're going to have to remind people what things mean. Remembering the audience is why they're there. And, the people who showed up are the people who are there to learn, so you got to accommodate them. Images. Images are super useful in a presentation. They take up space, they add fun, they convey information. There's a whole pile of places to get images from. Some of them are, I'm going to say, more free than others, right? Obviously, anyone can take a screenshot from the internet and use it, but some images are allowed to be used for reuse and, officially. So you can go to Google and search the images, and if you click on the advanced section tools and search by type, you can choose Creative Commons license, which allows you to reuse it with pretty much no restrictions. There's a lot of images there. Oh, that's the math team timer. The first time that happened, it scared me. I was like, is that a fire alarm? Like, no, good. So the next place you can get images is ones you've made yourself, right? Screenshots of things you're working on. When you do this, remember that you're taking a screenshot. So you want to use what I call reactive screenshots. Either zoom in, or even easier, make your browser super narrow. That will force the web page to adapt to a narrower screen, which is why it's called reactive, and allow you to take a screenshot that's going to be readable within your presentation at a super huge font. So this is our calendar for the team. You can see today is on it. And for anyone who's ever looked at this calendar before, Sty people, it doesn't look like this on your computer, right? It is much bigger. There's more going on. But this is what it looks like on essentially an iPad, or if you zoom in, or if you have terrible vision. You can also take the same screenshot, even more zoomed in, and highlight the thing we care about. So this is our December calendar. As you can see, StuySplash is today. This calls a lot more attention to it than what I did in the previous screenshot, because my point is to highlight StuySplash, not the entire calendar. You could put an arrow, or you can zoom in so much that pretty much all of that is available. I like this one best, though, because it gives you the context of where you are. Right? You have enough of a calendar to understand that we're looking at a calendar here, but it focuses in on the thing I want you to see. We have animations. I've been using those consistently, one thing at a time. Then there's the links for later. Tiny URL is your friend. If you give a tiny URL, people can remember it. Right? I can remember tiny URL 694 presentation. I'm not going to remember a full long URL. It helps you generate URLs that are usable. When doing a demo, remember why you're using the demo. The number one failure of demos is tech. And the second failure point is that you're doing it like it's a science project. Remembering the audience, remember them, they're important, is about letting the demo be about what they need. Right? I don't care about the 18 steps to click on in order to do something. I care how I can accomplish it. So letting me know that in the demo and up front, all right, this is why we're doing this demo, is helpful in making sure that it's a useful demo. Having a second person, as mentioned earlier, for the demo is also helpful. And having a backup. If your demo is anything technical, you need to have a backup plan in case the demo fails. It could be screenshots, it could be a video, it could be someone who's going to talk about it. I don't think the RoboTigers needed a backup because nothing's going to go wrong with here's the Rio, pass it around. Right? That's a very low-tech demo. But for anything that's live, you have to be super careful. And you all got to see that today. It wasn't even a demo, but I started my presentation without a screen. And, you have to run with whatever happens. When I was new to presenting, I would print out my presentation on paper, and I would use that if I have to. But I've given this presentation before, so I wasn't worried about that. All right, interactivity. There's nothing more boring than going to a talk and 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 a talk, right? That's like school or boring meetings at work for the adults. You need to make sure people's brains are awake. And that's hard because it's been a long day and we have competing things and there's a thing on the mind and I'll go swimming later and all of that stuff. So how do you engage people? The most common way is polls, right? There was the raise your hand if you knew Java thing. We did some group workshops because this particular talk was suited to them. But asking people for things, right? Think about this. All right, one person tell me this. It breaks it up a little and it lets people feel engaged. There's a book series called Head First. And in the intro, they go, your brain knows what it's important. It's being chased by a tiger. That's great, right? But then they get to why this matters. Well, we have to convince our brain that things are important. And that's where cartoons and games and points and being alert fit in. Don't call on people. Ask them to raise their hand and then call on people, right? You don't want, hey, Howard, what do you think about this? It's like, I don't want to talk about it. We talked about groups. Next up is what do you need to present logistically? You need to think about a few things, whether you're at home or in person. The first one, ironically, is projection. We have projection. Yay! The next one is how are you going to see the screen, right? The way for not to see the screen is to go like this. Well, the next thing is that you need a clicker. You want to talk to the audience. That means you need another screen that is not the one being shared. In person, that's typically a laptop in front of you. At home, it's a second screen or, worst case, a printout, hopefully a second screen, so that you have something that's different than what the audience sees in order to see what's coming. And the clicker allows you to move around. Clickers are pretty cheap. They let you move around during your presentation. So if you're in person, you can go places that aren't being coupled to the screen. Any speaker notes you have, you can have those. In PowerPoint, you're able to put on preview mode and have text that's there, or you can have notes on an index card or whatever, but anything that you need as a reference for yourself. A timer. How do you know whether you're running out of time? In this room, there's a clock. I have my phone because I can't see so well, so I can't read that clock, right? Maybe you have somebody with a card that reminds you if you're halfway through, some way of knowing where things are. And if you're online, you need to have a chat window open so you see if there's confused people in your presentation. In person, you can see confused people in real life. Next up, we have an evaluation. This font is too small. I'm sorry. I wanted to get it all on one screen. I spoke at a conference this year called UberConf. It is a conference I've been to that is the most on top of speaker feedback that I've seen in my entire life. You get a speaker feedback form that includes a whole pile of things. You've got your overall rating. Most conferences do that. I'm used to that. Then you got, was the level of the session right? Like, all right, that's a good one, right? Did you speak to your target audience? Would you recommend it to others? That's a good one. If you said it was okay, but you wouldn't recommend it, they probably don't want you back. Then how was the speaker? How was their style and delivery? Did they talk to you? Did they talk to their shoes? Who knows? Did the speaker have a good knowledge of the subject? You want to be learning from someone who knows their subject. That doesn't mean that you're an expert on everything. It means you know the thing you're talking about, right? So the people in their back, do they remember what it's like to be a rookie team, right? They probably do because it was last year, right? Do I remember what it's like to be on a rookie team? No idea. I would get 0. I have no business talking about that. If there were handouts, how was the quality of the handouts? Then we have the content. Was it consistent with the description? Remember, deliver on what you promised the audience. You don't want to surprise them with, oh, we're going to talk about something else today. Was there new information? You want to learn something in a talk. Did it meet your expectations? That's an interesting one because people come in with all sorts of expectations. I had one guy who filled this out and wrote, I expected that I wouldn't like the talk and I didn't like the talk. And I'm reading his comments. It's like, why did you pick my talk? Right? There were other talks going on at the same time. And I found out what happened later. He went with some other people from work and they said they were each going to attend one breakout in that slot and he drew the short straw. So none of them wanted to go to a talk on that topic and he had to. And, if you go into a presentation like, I'm not going to learn anything there, like, guess what you're not going to learn about? So I was a little annoyed about that, but sure. Then they asked come free form, what did you like and what would you improve? So that's a lot to think about, but these are all of the things that are important to the audience and therefore should be important to you as a speaker. Before I do questions, I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning and because I want to show the URL of this presentation that I read to you. I know my last name isn't that easy, so I'm worried that it got lost on the way. You know how I go. Okay, now we're going to do a few minutes of questions and then the book giveaway. Who has a question? Is that a hand? I can't tell. Yes. How do you handle when you freeze up? Good question. The best way is to present with somebody else because the odds of you freezing at the same time are low. And also the less experienced speaker is more likely to freeze. When I present at work, I try to present with someone who's entry level to give them the opportunity. And I tell them at any point during the presentation, you say, and now Jeanne will, whatever, right? And now Jeanne will speak or Jeanne will answer that. So they have that less pressure. If you're speaking by yourself, pawn it off and someone else doesn't work. And you just deal with it. You freeze and at some point you unfreeze and you recover. You can make a joke out of it or you can pretend it didn't happen. The nice thing is people don't care. As a speaker or a new speaker, we get all in our heads about that. And you've seen, I've stumbled a couple times during this presentation. Nobody cared. Nobody's going to be like, oh, that's a terrible presentation. You said 2 words wrong. So it's just, move past it, go back to the content. The people are there for the content, and that's the most important thing. And I saw Brian nodding, so I'm curious if you want to add to that.
Yeah, there's one big thing I wanted to add. Anytime you freeze up, it feels a lot longer in your head than it actually is.
Yeah.
So what may feel like 10 seconds of you not saying anything, like maybe people will notice that you paused for a second, but it doesn't feel,
Right.
It feels, there's kind of this idea in psychology that humans are like think people are paying more attention to them than they actually are, which oddly enough is like also applies to like a conference setting. Even though you're obviously the center of attention, people still aren't paying as much attention to you as you think they are.
And they're paying attention to your information, not you specifically. Also, I was reminded because I just had a drink of water. You can buy time in other ways. So if you realize that you're freezing, have a drink of water, tie your shoe, press that. Give yourself what feels like a more natural pause to get more comfortable. The other thing on freezing is try to, in quotes, remove the cause of the freezing when you got back. So that's an opportunity to be like, all right, I know Howard. I'm going to look right at Howard for 10 seconds and nobody else to give myself time to get more comfortable before I dare to look away to somebody else. Howard?
The thing I frequently teach people is you just ask them to restate the question. You don't even have to listen to them restating the question. You're just thinking at that point.
Yeah. That's good advice about restating the question, assuming it happens during Q&A and not plop in the middle of a presentation. I would suggest to write out bullet points of what you're going to say and either memorize them or bring an index card. The problem with writing up everything you're going to say is it turns into a robotic presentation, right? It's like the book report thing. And if you're doing a book report, by all means, memorize your presentation. But if you're presenting at a conference, you don't want it to be. And then we went to the second floor to the robotics lab, which is on the fourth floor, to see how the robot worked, right? That's not a fun presentation. You want it to be more like you're talking to your friends, but having the ideas is useful. And there's no problem with having an index card or a paper with all the ideas written down and referring to it. I did that a lot when I was first presenting, and then I got to the point where I did it and put it in my pocket. So I had it as a safety net in case I needed it, and then I realized I wasn't using it anymore and I stopped. For impact presenters, I totally recommend the same thing. Index card or Post-it note with your main points in case you need them. Because we're back to it's about the content. It's not a presentation skills competition. I saw another hand over there.
Yeah, so I have a tendency of, right? So I have a tendency of using a lot of filler words, and sometimes I wouldn't even think of what I'm trying to say. So if there's like a way to not positive every sentence, but in a way I can still grab the audience's attention.
Right, so you're supposed to pause instead of using filler words. It's definitely an acquired skill. It's when we practice a lot in Toastmasters, but you can practice on your own. When I was in 5th grade, my dad took a business class because he stuttered and stumbled and repeated words all the time. And what they said was that you practice with your family, talk about something, and every time you use one of those words, have them ring a bell. And I was in 5th grade, so this is awesome fun. I get to keep ringing the bell. But that's a way of drawing attention to it yourself and getting used to pausing in a low-stakes setting so that you can apply it more to a higher-stakes one. It is distracting when people use filler words a lot, but it's certainly better than them not speaking at all. So, I encourage you to get better at it, but I encourage you to speak anyway. And I can't tell from here if you're 18 or not, but if you are, I recommend Toastmasters. They have them all over the place. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Toastmasters, toastmasters.org. You search by zip code. It shows you where all the local clubs are. It's $45 for 6 months, and they're really, really good at working on that. Right?
Also, just a lot of those problems go away the more you practice
Yes.
your talk. You don't need as many. You don't find yourself pausing to think about it and inserting a filler word as often if you're not prepared.
Right.
So I actually have a kind of opposing question, which is how do you get, from a mentor perspective, how do you get students out of the mindset of it has to be perfect. If I use a like, I have to start over. It's awful. Now I can't do anything because I'm too nervous about it, agitated personally. So how do you go about teaching the entry level or newer people to present well without having that high stakes energy?
So how do you teach kids to not get all in their heads about this? A lot of, I want to see what the other mentors here think as well who've done presentation stuff, but a lot of it is practice and getting them to power through it. So we're going to do this 5-7 minutes end to end. We're not going to start over no matter what happens. We're just practicing and let them see that it turned out just fine. That said, I see a lot of kids that are nervous for all 3 or 4 years they're doing presentations, and on some level it's part of them. So I see the difference between 9th and 12th grade, and oh my God, they're so much better now. But they're still just as nervous in their heads as they were as little 9th graders. because they don't realize that how much they've improved and how good it is now. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that?
I
Howard?
definitely found that once I had successfully given my first presentation in a setting like this, I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. Like,
Right, but the question is for the kids.
yeah.
How do you get the little ninth graders to not be freaked out about it?
Yeah, I think it's just one thing that is kind of useful to remind people, like, hey, it's hard and scary the first time, but it's not as bad. Like, once you do it, you'll feel great.
Right.
You'll,
Oh, before I get to Howard, the other thing for Impact specific and Dean's List specifically is remind them they're not being judged on their presentation skills, right? Because they feel like they are. They're not. They're being judged on their information, and the presentation is a means to that end. Howard?
So to teach people that not everything needs to be perfect, I have senior level coworkers, executive level coworkers who have still not learned this concept yet. Of it doesn't always need to be 100% the solution. You can accept a 90% solution. And oftentimes people are like, I need to do all of this. I need to go all the way. When you've already answered the question, you don't need to talk anymore. And a lot of times is instead of teaching them you need to say everything, teaching them to say how much you have to say.
Okay. Also, the answer to a different question, but thank you. On the original question of teaching the kids to not freak out about it, this is not something we've mastered on this team either. It's hard. It's legitimately a hard problem, but getting them to do it and getting them to believe, that they can. And also when they do it for real, when they do impact for real, they get 7 minutes. They don't get to start over. So trying to model that. But it really doesn't matter. It's just how do we convince them of that fact?
We may make this look easy, but that's only because we've done this a lot of times. Like, we were not always this good.
I've been in Toastmasters for 15 years. Other questions? Back? Okay, that was a great question, which was, for your presentation is timed. How do you make sure you have time to present? I have a few pieces of advice on that. The first one is don't target the time of your presentation, target less. So this was an hour presentation. I made sure it was a 40-minute presentation, so I had extra time for Q&A, right? Because Q&A is as long or short as you want it to be. The second one is when you're practicing, write down what time you get to certain events so that you can see if you're on pace, because that tells you whether you need to slow down or speed up, and not, oh crap, I have 10 minutes left on 100 slides, right? If I see that I'm a quarter of the way in and I'm a third of the way in on time, all right, I'm going to speed up. I'm not going to take questions now. Maybe I'll leave out a story or two in my presentation. So being able to adjust to that and know that information helps. The other one is if it's I'm going to say more important presentation, find a buddy to help you. Have someone who can sit there and be like, you're 2 minutes in, you're 4 minutes in, so that you have that information and you're not caught off guard if you run out of time at the end. Especially if it's like a sales pitch or something, you want to be subtle about it, or a formal presentation like you're presenting to the whole school, you don't want to be the one who runs over. So knowing how long it's been allows you to adjust to that as much as possible. Yes?
So it's really just like, don't think about the time, like, just know, like, you know, like, you finish, just roll with the next topic that I'm going to say.
Okay, and Brian also had something?
Yeah. It can also be like a pretty iterative process. Like, I did my talk this morning was for a 45-minute time slot. When I did my first dry run of it, it ended up being like 25 minutes. And I'm like, okay, this isn't quite right. Where can I add a bit more? What do I think would make this talk better? And I kind of took some time, added a bit more to that, and we got to it time I was happy with.
The other thing I would add to that is think in blocks. That's actually something I learned from Toastmasters. I have a really good feel for what 5 minutes of material is because we give 5 to 7 minute speeches all the time. But knowing how long 5 minutes of material is lets me know about how much I can put in my presentation, and it also helps keep me on pace. Howard?
So what I do when I know I need to hit a time goal is I will section out what time goal I have for each thing. So if I'm going and I know slide 10 is supposed to be 10 minutes in, I'll add or take away stories or filler. So for each set of slides, I'll have like a filler story that I can either include or not include, or stuff that I know I can take out. And if I'm ahead, I'll add in the story. If I'm not, I'll pull stuff in.
I'm going to just thank Howard and Brian for this example because, like, we didn't talk about this topic at all before today, but this is showing why having co-presenters are useful even though they're not co-presenters. If they were down here, imagine how much more dynamic this Q&A would be. Other questions? How do you control mannerisms? Mostly practice, with one exception. If you find that you're putting your hands in the pockets or fidgeting or playing with your hair, holding something helps, right? Maybe a pen or a marker, because it makes it a lot harder for you to do all of those things, and that helps you train yourself to not do them. And also a few deliberate gestures gives you control, right? I'm going to tell you 3 stories today. The first story is, so being able to sprinkle those in lets you think about using your hands properly and gives you less time to do all of the things with them that you might not wish to do. Back. I didn't talk about how to find conferences. I took that as a given. But, you know, we're at a conference right now. For adults, there's professional conferences. At colleges, there's internal things. But I didn't talk about that topic at all.
When you're at a conference or like a meeting, how do you know if there's too much information or too little? Because sometimes when I present, I feel like they're either not absorbing as much or there's
Right. It's hard to tell whether you have too much or too little information because it depends on the audience. You can take polls, though. Right, you can go 5 minutes in, you know, how do we feel about this? Do we feel like we're moving too fast, too slow, not enough? And also asking people afterwards lets you see what they got out of it and what, you know, for, like Brian said, iterate for next time. If you're asking your manager for feedback, I recommend asking them what would you change, though, and not how was it? Because every time you ask your manager how a presentation was, they think you want a pat on the head. Oh, that was a great presentation. You did a good job. Like, thank you. I got nothing out of that. What will help me for the future? Right, so what would you change actually forces them to reflect and give you something useful. I saw another hand somewhere. It wasn't Howard's, but it's up now, so go ahead.
If you want to comment on the gestures part, I know that I gesture a lot with my hands. So instead of me trying to awkwardly not move, I try to rope it into the presentation. So I'll use it to kind of point out what I'm trying to say. Or sometimes I'll use it as, I'll root it onto something on the computer. So I know that my hand's right there moving the slides. But it was definitely a lot of iteration to figure out what to do with my hands. And I think hand gestures are one of the hardest things I have to drill out of people for presenting. Because they're like, I have hands, what do I do? Like, you don't have to do anything, just let them sit.
That I have hands quote, by the way, was a quote from our impact team right after COVID. At this point, I'm going to cut off questions and do the book giveaway, and then I'll go to the side if people have more questions. The way we're going to do this is we're going to do numbers like in order, 1, 2, 3. If you don't want the book, let me know and just say pass instead of a number. That said, you all probably know someone on your team who knows Java, so you can give the book to someone else if you don't want it. So let's start counting. Oh, it's a book about Java that I wrote and will be signed by me. 1. I hope people are counting right. I can't hear any of you. Yes. 7. Okay. Back. Did anyone not get a number that wanted a number? Okay. So we're picking a random number between 1 and 22. The number is 19. 19? All right, come on up, and everybody else, have a good day.